You wouldn't fall for a scam, right? Neither did the banks, auditors, prime ministers, or pension fund managers, and yet they did. Repeatedly. From fake shipping companies in 1720 to crypto collapses in 2022, history proves one thing. If the story's good enough, the truth doesn't matter until it's too late. The South Sea Bubble. In 1720, Britain pulled off its first real financial faceplant. The South Sea Company promised to pay off the country's debt by trading with South America. One tiny detail: Spain owned South America, and they weren't exactly rolling out the red carpet. Still, the company had Parliament in its pocket and the King's blessing, so investors didn't ask questions, they just threw money. Lots of it. Stock shot from 128 to over £1, in a few months. Because apparently, trust me bro, counted as a business plan. Even Isaac Newton bought in. The genius of gravity made a tidy profit. Then he got greedy, reinvested near the top, and lost £20. In today's money, over £4 million. His quote, "I can calculate the motions of the heavenly bodies, but not the madness of people." Translation, oops. And it wasn't just South Sea. The country went full scam chic. Other companies popped up overnight. One promised to drain the Red Sea. Another? A company for carrying out an undertaking of great advantage, but no one to know what it is. People still handed over cash. Because FOMO is timeless. Then, surprise, the whole thing collapsed. Prices tanked. Fortunes vanished. Lawmakers got caught insider trading. Executives ran off with the money. The same parliament that boosted the company was now pretending it had never heard of it. King George's crew tried to look serious. Arrests were made. Assets were seized. The powerful walked away, bruised but rich. The South Sea Bubble didn't just pop. It exploded. And left behind one very clear lesson. If the scam is big enough, it's not called a crime. It's called finance. Charles Ponzi's Postal Pyramid. Let's fast forward to 1920, Boston. Enter Charles Ponzi, a smooth-talking Italian immigrant with big dreams, zero ethics, and a plan that made absolutely no sense. Which, naturally, made it perfect. Ponzi claimed he could turn tiny international postage coupons into massive profits. How? Currency exchange loopholes. Buy stamps cheap in one country, redeem them for more expensive ones in another? Sounds clever, until you realize the math doesn't work unless you move literal tons of mail every day. Spoiler, he didn't. But numbers didn't matter. Hype did. He promised a 50% return in 45 days. Word spread. People lined up around the block. By summer, he was raking in $250,000. That's about $3.5 million a day now. All from postal coupons he never actually used. Investors thought he was a genius. Newspapers praised his financial innovation. Even banks got nervous because they couldn't match his returns. Nobody wanted to miss out. Not the baker, not the barber, not the mayor's cousin. Behind the scenes, Ponzi was just moving money from new investors to pay the old ones. Classic pyramid. No investments, no postage, just an endless shell game. He bought a fancy mansion, wore custom suits, hired bodyguards, and acted like a king. He even sued a journalist who dared to question him, then offered to buy the paper. That's how confident he was. But then things started slipping. The Boston Post ran a full investigation. Reporters asked for proof. The math crumbled. Federal agents showed up. The money wasn't there. Investors panicked. Lines outside his office turned into angry mobs. Ponzi was arrested in August 1920. Authorities said he owed $7 million and had less than $1 million in assets. Over 0 people lost everything. Some gave up homes, others had mortgaged their futures. Ponzi went to prison, then got deported. He died in Brazil, broke and forgotten. Well, almost forgotten. His name still lives on in every scam that copies his playbook. So, if you're ever promised absurd profits from a sure thing, just remember, it's not new. It's just Ponzi, wearing a newer suit. The Great Salad Oil Swindle. By the 1960s, Wall Street thought it had seen every trick. Then along came Anthony Tino DeAngelis, a former butcher turned salad oil magnate who faked his way into one of the dumbest scams ever pulled on American finance. Tino's company, Allied Crude Vegetable Oil, claimed to be a major soybean oil distributor. He borrowed millions against his oil inventory, storing giant tanks at a New Jersey port. Inspectors came by, took a sample from the top, nodded, and moved on. One small issue. The tanks were filled with water. Tino just poured a few feet of salad oil on top, because oil floats. It was less a scam and more a high school science experiment with a $150 million price tag. Banks, investors, even the USDA backed him. American Express alone lost nearly $60 million. Their stock tanked around 40% overnight. Turns out Amex was using oil barrels as collateral, barrels that were more seawater than soybean. What really blew minds was how long it worked. Tino forged warehouse receipts, faked audits, and bribed inspectors. The man was running an empire on salad dressing and confidence. He even tried to corner the soybean market using borrowed cash from companies he was scamming. It was a Ponzi scheme inside a commodity scam, wrapped in deep-fried stupidity. Eventually, someone noticed that the inventory didn't line up. Surprise audits followed, the tanks were opened, and boom, wet chaos. Banks realized they'd been financing puddles. Tino was arrested, tried, and sent to prison. He got out a few years later and, because America is nothing if not forgiving, went back to business. His second act? Selling meat to public schools? What could go wrong? The salad oil swindle didn't just wipe out investors. It shattered trust in big institutions. Amex barely survived. The government scrambled to fix inspection laws, all because no one thought to stir the tank. The Franklin National Bank collapse. Franklin National Bank started as a sleepy Long Island operation. By the 1970s, it was the 20th largest bank in the U.S. Then came Michele Sindona, a flashy Italian banker who dressed like a Bond villain and cooked books like it was family tradition. Sindona had ties to the Vatican, the mafia, and political insiders in Italy. He acquired Franklin Bank to funnel dirty money from Europe into the American financial system. At first, everything looked fine. The bank grew fast, profits soared, executives toasted champagne. Wall Street nodded approvingly. But behind the scenes, total chaos. Sindona used Franklin to cover losses at his other banks. He made terrible currency bets, faked loan documents, and siphoned millions through shell companies. He even reported profits that didn't exist. Auditors didn't blink. Regulators were clueless. The board either didn't know or didn't care. Then the US dollar devalued. Sindona's risky foreign exchange plays blew up in his face. Franklin's losses piled up fast. Over $1.2 billion disappeared. In October 1974, the bank collapsed. At the time, it was the largest bank failure in American history. Thousands lost savings. Shareholders were ruined. People who trusted the smiling bankers behind the desk suddenly found the doors locked. Congress launched hearings. Sindona got indicted in New York. Italy wanted him too. But instead of answering to anyone, he faked his own kidnapping and blamed communists. Yes, really. Eventually, he was caught and convicted. In 1986, while serving time in an Italian prison for another fraud case, he died under suspicious circumstances. Some believed it was a message. Others said it was a loose end being tied up. Officially, no one had answers. Either way, Franklin Bank was toast. And Sindona? He became a walking warning sign. The lesson? If your bank's CEO hangs out with mobsters in the Vatican, maybe don't keep your retirement there. The teenager who scammed Wall Street. In the mid-1980s, Wall Street met its youngest scammer and got played by a kid with a carpet cleaner. Barry Minkow was 16 years old when he launched ZZZZ Best from his parents' garage in Reseda, California. It started small, cleaning rugs, bouncing checks, and stealing credit cards. You know, entrepreneur stuff. But Barry had bigger dreams. He wanted ZZZZ Best to go public. The problem? Carpet cleaning isn't sexy, so he invented a fake business division, insurance restoration. Think fire damage, water damage, massive repairs, all fake. He printed up phony invoices, rented fake office space, and even staged job sites to fool auditors. And it worked. By 1986, ZZZZ Best was trading on NASDAQ. Market cap? Over 200 million. Barry was on magazine covers, doing talk shows, and driving a Ferrari to high school. Wall Street loved the story. Young genius, booming growth, and all-American hustle. Never mind the numbers didn't add up. Banks kept lending. Auditors kept signing off. The SEC stayed asleep. ZZZZ Best's so-called restoration contracts made up 90% of its revenue, yet no one ever actually saw one in real life. That's because they didn't exist. The House of Lies finally started to wobble when a journalist at the Los Angeles Times smelled something off. He started digging. Turns out one of Barry's supposed job sites was an empty lot. Another was a staged building with props and actors. Investigators got curious. In 1987, the company collapsed. Barry was charged with 57 counts of fraud, racketeering, money laundering, you name it. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison but served just over 7. Today, he calls himself a fraud expert. Sure. ZZZZ Best wasn't just some teenage prank. It was one of the largest accounting frauds in US history at the time. It exposed how easily Wall Street gets distracted by charisma, press, and shiny cars. So next time someone pitches you the next billion-dollar startup founded by a high schooler with a briefcase, Maybe check if the building exists first. The Bre-X gold hoax. In 1993, a tiny Canadian mining company called Bre-X claimed it struck gold in the jungles of Busang, Indonesia. Not just gold, the largest gold deposit ever discovered. Billions of dollars worth. Investors lost their minds. Stock prices exploded. Geologists fainted from excitement. Sort of. Bre-X's share price shot from pennies to over 280. The company's market value reached $6 billion. Everyone wanted a piece. Canadian politicians called it a national triumph. The Indonesian government demanded a cut. Wall Street analysts called it the gold find of the century. But here's what was actually happening. Core samples were being salted. Translation? Someone was shaving gold off jewelry and mixing it into the drill samples. Fake gold dust. Real hype. The guy behind it was Filipino geologist Michael de Guzman. He handled the testing and results. Nobody questioned him. Not the investors. Not the analysts. Not even Bre-X's own executives, who either didn't know or didn't care, because their stock options were looking very nice. Then came the due diligence. A legitimate mining firm, Freeport-McMoRan, was invited in to verify the site. They found almost nothing. No gold, no massive deposit, just jungle, dirt, and the smell of something rotten. Right before the truth broke, de Guzman conveniently fell out of a helicopter into the jungle. His body was found days later. Or a body. Some said it was too decomposed to identify. Others think he faked his death and vanished with the money. Either way, he was gone, and so was Bre-X's credibility. The stock crashed to pennies. Thousands of investors were wiped out. Retirement savings gone. Lawsuits flew. Executives claimed ignorance. No one went to jail. Bre-X became the cautionary tale of the 1990s. A shining example of what happens when greed fogs over common sense, and no one bothers to verify anything beyond the headline. So yes, Bre-X struck gold, just not in the ground, only in people's imaginations. The House of Cards. By the late 1990s, Enron wasn't just a company, it was the company. Based in Houston, Enron branded itself as an energy innovator, a tech disruptor, and a Wall Street darling. It claimed to be revolutionizing energy trading. In reality, it was just really good at inventing numbers. At its peak, Enron was valued at over $70 billion. Executives strutted through financial shows, awards galas, and political fundraisers. CEO Jeff Skilling and Chairman Ken Lay were treated like economic rock stars. They promised unlimited growth, unlimited profits, and best of all, no risk. Behind the scenes, it was all paper. Enron created hundreds of off-the-books entities called special purpose vehicles. These ghost companies took on Enron's debt and hid losses while keeping the main company's books squeaky clean. It was financial smoke and mirrors, and the auditors at Arthur Andersen signed off like it was normal. Analysts loved Enron. They didn't understand how it worked, and that was kind of the point. Skilling even told one investor, "You just don't get it." No one did, because there was nothing to get. Employees were encouraged to dump their life savings into Enron stock. Executives, meanwhile, were quietly cashing out. Between them, Lay and Skilling sold millions in shares before the crash. In late 2001, the truth started leaking. Investigations began. The stock price nosedived from 90 to under 1. Tens of thousands of employees lost jobs, savings, and pensions. Arthur Andersen, the fifth largest audit firm in the world, collapsed under the fallout. Enron's bankruptcy was, at the time, the largest in U.S. history. Skilling got 24 years in prison, later reduced. Lay died of a heart attack before sentencing. Executives went to court, but plenty of players walked away untouched. What did Enron sell? Really? Confidence, the illusion of infinite growth. And a reminder that if a company needs 500 shell corporations to optimize earnings, it's probably lying. In the end, Enron didn't explode. It just slowly unraveled, and took a chunk of America's financial trust with it. Bernie Madoff's $65 billion illusion. He was Wall Street royalty, former NASDAQ chairman, trusted by banks, charities, celebrities, and Ivy League institutions. He promised steady returns, about 10% per year, no matter what the market did. People called it magic. That was the first red flag. His firm, Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities, took in billions. He told clients their money was being invested in blue-chip stocks using a strategy called a split-strike conversion. Sounds complex. It wasn't real. There were no trades, no stocks, just spreadsheets and fake statements printed to look official. Madoff simply used new investors' money to pay off older ones. A straight-up Ponzi scheme. But dressed in a tuxedo, by 2008, the fund looked invincible. Even after the dot-com crash and 9/11, it never dipped. Institutions begged to get in. He actually turned people away to build exclusivity. That made them want it more. Then came the financial crisis. Investors needed to cash out. Madoff couldn't keep up. There wasn't enough new money coming in to keep the pyramid standing. So, like every great scammer cornered by math, he confessed. On December 11, 2008, Bernie was arrested. He admitted to running a fraud worth $65 billion on paper. The actual cash loss? Around $20 billion. Still one of the biggest frauds in history. More than 4,800 clients were affected. Retirement accounts vanished. Foundations collapsed. Hollywood names like Kevin Bacon and Steven Spielberg lost millions. Even Elie Wiesel's charity got wiped out. Madoff was sentenced to 150 years in prison. He died there in 2021. His sons? One died under tragic circumstances. The other of cancer. His wife disowned him. And yet, many of his clients still believed he meant well. Bernie Madoff didn't invent the Ponzi scheme, but he industrialized it, polished it, made it polite. His scam wasn't built on greed alone. It was built on trust, exclusivity, and the one thing no one questions until it's too late: consistent success. Turns out, if the returns are too good to be true, they're just fake. Wirecard, Germany's phantom fintech. By 2020, Wirecard was the pride of Germany's tech sector. A flashy digital payments company, it claimed to handle billions in global transactions. It had offices in 26 countries, a seat on the DAX, Germany's stock index, and a CEO who looked like he lived in spreadsheets. Investors loved it. The German government backed it. Regulators defended it. It was also completely fake. The crack started early. In 2008, short sellers called out shady accounting. Wirecard responded with lawsuits and threats. The company said the rumors were just jealous rivals. Classic move. But the numbers never added up. Then came the whistleblowers. Journalists at the Financial Times uncovered forged contracts, fake clients, and missing money. Wirecard denied everything. In 2019, things got weird. Wirecard announced that $2 billion was sitting in 2 banks in the Philippines. When investigators called the banks, both said, "We've never heard of you." That's when the balloon finally popped. In June 2020, CEO Markus Braun resigned. Days later, he was arrested. COO Jan Marsalek? He vanished. Rumor has it he fled to Russia with help from intelligence contacts. Because of course he did. Turns out, about half of Wirecard's revenue didn't exist. The company had created fake subsidiaries and fake transactions to inflate their value. Auditors Ernst & Young missed it for years. German regulators, instead of investigating Wirecard, went after the journalists. Yes, really. Wirecard filed for insolvency. Over $4 billion in market value was wiped out overnight. German politicians were embarrassed. International banks were stunned. Investors were furious. The country's reputation for efficiency? Slightly dented. The Wirecard mess showed that fintech glitz can hide a lot of grime. All it takes is buzzwords, shiny branding, and a few $1 billion that may or may not be sitting in a phantom account on another continent. Wirecard didn't break the rules. It pretended the rules didn't apply. And for years, that worked. If your CFO tells you $2 billion is probably in the Philippines, maybe, just maybe, follow up on that. FTX, crypto's crown jewel. FTX was supposed to be the golden child of crypto. Founded in 2019 by Sam Bankman-Fried, better known as SBF, it quickly became one of the biggest crypto exchanges in the world. SBF was everywhere. Magazine covers, political fundraisers, Super Bowl ads. He wore t-shirts and cargo shorts to meetings, pitched effective altruism, and convinced everyone he was just a genius nerd saving the world. Turns out, he was mostly moving customer money to his hedge fund. FTX grew fast. It promised transparency and security. The platform handled billions in trades daily. Investors poured in. Celebs like Tom Brady and Larry David endorsed it. Politicians cashed in their donations. Everyone wanted in on the hype. What no one knew? FTX was siphoning off customer funds to prop up Alameda Research, SBF's private trading firm. Alameda used the money for risky bets, real estate, and loans to insiders. Billions in customer funds were gone, quietly misused and totally undocumented. In November 2022, a leak revealed that FTX and Alameda were financially tangled in ways that made zero sense. Binance, a rival exchange, pulled out of a deal to buy FTX after seeing the books. That move triggered a run. Customers rushed to withdraw funds. FTX didn't have them. The company filed for bankruptcy almost overnight. An $8 billion hole was discovered in its balance sheet. SBF resigned and was arrested in the Bahamas a month later. He now faces a laundry list of federal charges, from wire fraud to money laundering. FTX's collapse nuked trust in crypto. Major coins crashed. Regulators pounced. Politicians scrambled to return donations. Investors were left asking how no one saw it coming. Again, SBF called it a liquidity crisis. Others called it theft in a hoodie. FTX didn't just go bust, it detonated. Not because crypto is evil, but because unchecked power and made-up numbers are. And if your crypto platform is run out of a penthouse in the Bahamas, with no board of directors and a billion-dollar side fund called Fiat at FTX, yeah, that's not innovation. That's a red flag in a Hawaiian shirt.